This is season 3 of Whatever She's Having with Linda Hoffner and
Claire Suma Diwaria.
And we're here to talk about being fearless, showing up for ourselves, and being a champion for other women's success. So today we are joined by our dear friend, Nate Caminos, Director of Government Relations for the Port of Seattle, community champion, housing advocate, and all-around class act. Welcome, Nate. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Linda. Happy to be here. Hey, long-time subscriber, and I listened to all.
Wait, long time? Like how long?
Yes,
but, yeah,
every episode.
Listened, or now recently, obviously, watched all of your episodes. So excited to be here, and I just appreciate all that you've done in sharing your stories with the rest of the world, and yeah, happy to be here today, too, and share mine.
Oh, thank you. And, you know, we have said this before, but we have been surprised by the support that we've gotten from our male allies. And so having you here today is really special for us to get to know you a little bit better and to get your perspective on some of the things that we've been talking about and the challenges of community and, you know, delivering on joy and all of those things that Claire and I care so much about. So I want to talk about, first off, we all were in New York together a couple weeks ago. I already miss it. Maybe not the late nights, but love the city, love the experience that we had. And a lot of what we talked about was this idea of radical hospitality. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And how we can each deliver that. And I know Claire, you know, being in hospitality, it's really important to her about delivering on that. So at the Port of Seattle, like, what gets you excited about our region and the opportunities that we have to kind of be national leaders in travel and tourism?
Well, first of all, we're a special purpose government. We're not a general purpose government like a city or a county. And so we really have a special focus of what we're able to do and not to. And I would say our bread and butter is purely focused on economic development, workforce development, construction, in addition to just obviously being a major operator of SCA, or Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, and the seaport, and our connection and relationship with the Northwest Seaport Alliance through the Port of Tacoma. But a big part of it is, like, man, coming out of the pandemic a few years ago, we clearly were quite resilient compared to other parts of the country and world, just because of the diversity of the industries that existed here. And what we've seen, at least even in the form of travel and tourism, isn't just like a bounce back of passengers coming through the airport. It's also what we kind of like dubbed like revenge travel. I'm not just going to go to Hawaii and sit in coach. I'm going to go first class. Or I'm not just going to book a hotel room with for a king-size bed. I'm going to book a suite, right? Like, all these folks, families, personal travelers are wanting to like really make up for the years or trips that they didn't have together with their friends and loved ones. And so we see that resurgence. And it's interesting, too, because we even leading up to the pandemic, cruise was already the fastest growing and soon to be the largest cruise season route between Seattle and Alaska. And now it's certainly been coming back in that moniker. And it's really interesting to see just like the infrastructure and investments that we see that coming out of that, because it's not just the tens of thousands of people that come off the ship and that are going to Pike Place Market. They're coming out here to the east side. They're going hiking, exploring our outdoor recreation facilities. And I remember actually Tim and Brad Jones last week from Maidenbower and Visit Bellevue said, Nate, I think this is the first year we've actually seen more people coming for personal travel than we actually have for business travel, and due to a 9% increase in what they saw in terms of cruise passenger traffic. And that's interesting, right? Because it's not just the hospitality side of it all, it's the economic vitality of our region, because it's, again, not just the folks that are coming through to be dining in retail in our businesses. It's also what my colleagues get sick of me saying, the butter churner in Enumclaw, right? The croissant baker in Tukwila. These are all like really great, well-paying jobs. And we hosted the MLB All-Star Game last year. We're getting ready for now, kind of scary enough for FIFA 2026. These are just major milestones that our region's getting ready for. And so, yeah, we're doing great.
And having, you're from Hawaii, right?
Yes, originally, yeah.
Born and raised, or born?
Born, raised, moved up when I was like 8 or 9. Actually spent most of my school years living in South King County. And every summer I'll go back to Hawaii and live with an aunt and uncle who end up kind of like becoming my Hawaii parents.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a second home there.
So how do you take the concept of aloha? Like, how do you bring aloha to here?
Yeah, interesting. You know, a big part of that is, and a big part of my past work and careers is working with our indigenous communities and, you know, being born and raised in Hawaii and working with and growing up alongside Native Hawaiians, obviously the Pacific Northwest and our coastal Salish peoples. There's all, you know, our lands, the ecosystems that exist here, the 29 federally recognized tribes in our state. It's a big part of what we do too. And we can't just do what we're doing in normal order of business. We have to be thoughtful and be able to recognize the government relationships we have, as the port does now, and anybody would help coordinate and support memorandums of agreement, MOAs, with the Makoshin and Suquamish tribe. But when even just talking about this current topic too, thinking about them bringing the concept of Malama Hawaii, which is, hey, if we're going to be doing ecotourism and outdoor recreation, we have to do so thoughtfully about the native ecosystems that exist in these areas as well. And we're protecting and thoughtful about them as we're hiking along these trails and kayaking those rivers. So, yeah. We've been able to bring that in. We're actually working with the Snoqualmie Valley Chamber of Commerce now and the Snoqualmie Tribe and others to help kind of be a convener about what that could look like in terms of regional growth and travel and tourism out east.
I think it's like it's so important to protect the people who actually own the land and who with ancestors grew up here, and then they let us to be part of this community, and then we should respect and also honor that relationship. That's so important. But before my next question, actually I want to say I think most people doesn't realize Port of Seattle, not just the airport, right? There's maritime, there's the ports, there's the airport. There's a lot. For my short stint, since we're talking about FIFA, I had the honor to work with the anti-human trafficking nonprofit. I would say I want to give so much applause to your organization being the biggest supporter to protecting the vulnerable groups. Everybody go to airport, that sign in the bathroom is actually supported by Port of Seattle, let us to put in there. I think that, because I think before any kind of joy in life, safety is always the first. Yeah. And then for you and your team to always put in front line to giving that safety back to people who need it the most is amazing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, we're one of the leading states in the nation to take on and embark on anti-human trafficking legislation in Olympia. Former state senator Jeannie Colwell and state rep Velma Valoria were big stewards of that. And it's not just at those signs are not just at the bathrooms at the airport. They're all throughout all port facilities across our property lines. So
That's amazing. Thank you for all you do.
Oh, thank you.
Perfect.
I appreciate that.
Well, now we have to talk about actually the joy, because we just came back from this big tour from New York with BDA tour, and then when we went to a little island, I missed that part. Y'all went. I went to the day before with one of our friends, Catherine from East Trail. Me and her, we were being like introverts. Afterwards, we were let's go take a late night walk on the beach and then trying to get some relaxing time. But for you, I guess what brings you joy?
Surface level hiking, biking. I got to get a new electric bike, I think, being a board chair of East Trail Partners now. My knees are not the same what they were before when I was younger. I'm a soon-to-be 42-year-old video gamer, but I love to cook, too, and sports were a big part of my...
What's your go-to? I gotta ask. What's your go-to cooking recipe?
That's a great question. I don't know.
I need to know what I'm having when I come over for dinner.
Right. Well, yeah, that's a good point. My wife bought me a Joule, which is a sous vide machine, a few years back for my birthday, and so I've been doing a lot. And then you got a Searsall attachment on a propane tank.
Yes.
So there's a whole lot of science behind. There's all kinds of stuff in terms of the modernist cuisine movement in terms of how do you try and perfect. Perfection. Of course, now you're going to get personal of how do I try and achieve perfection in my personal and professional life too? Now I'm applying it as an artist and trying to cook this perfect meal. But it is interesting. Coming from Hawaii, food is very much loved. Even back in the early 90s, we would ship coolers and boxes of food from Seattle back to our family in Hawaii and vice versa. We would send them oh boy, Alberto and all kinds of things that were super expensive to have 2,000 miles away on an island. And they would do the same of providing local food out here until we got institutions like Awajimaya being a bigger part of our trade. But no, I love all those things. Sports was a big part of my life growing up. Now I'm more of a viewer, and if anything, golfing's half of the year. But from a beyond the surface level side, I really am like a public servant at heart. And, part of the PAT podcast that you shared, Linda, where, the most interesting people will come from who have lived lives through trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
And, for good or not, unfortunately, I had a pretty rough upbringing or childhood, but it really brought me that initial perspective. That's a much longer story probably than the time we have here today, but I understood what it was to have and not have growing up 3 months of the year in Hawaii, living with an aunt and uncle who had great means, financially responsible. I mean, I went to Punahou private school in the morning and afternoon summer camp, worked at my uncle's shop at night, but I would come back here in the Seattle area, and my mom was working, a single mother, working 2 jobs to try and raise me and my younger sister. And I just remember crying like every June and September, every September for being brown skin and speaking with a pidgin accent from Hawaii, and every June going back to Hawaii and being light skinned and speaking perfect English, right? How I'm sounding right now. But it was interesting just to be able to understand the means of what it was by terms of class, by race, and what have you. And it really invigorated me to try and be a giver. And that's, I guess, my love language too. Not just gift giving, but also just making sure that I'm a bit of a caretaker. And I think my personality test in the career market has always been a mechanic as well. I feel like I'm always trying to fill this void of making sure I'm taking care of other people in the way that it makes me, seeing other people happy makes me happy.
You just bought me, my knee's been hurting, by the way, the listener audience. So actually Nate remembered and bought me a cream for that. That's actually really sweet. I think that showcases you actually a great listener, and also you care about our friendship, care about me as a friend. And, I think that, for how many people we meet in our life, I think it's really rare for people who actually remember, we tell them, to be honest, right? It's just I think especially for adult friendship, usually like Linda, we always talk about there's a lot of transactional relationships, and also there's a lot of just pass by acquaintances. It's I think we are so honored to have you here with us and talk about friendship. It just, when you bought me, I was like, my heart really melted. And also, he has white sneakers and perfect credit score. Come on, bro. It's that's
perfect hair, perfect shoes.
Yes. He's perfect.
Wardrobe change.
Something you said just triggered a question.
Yeah.
I want to know, I know you're, as I said in the introduction, a housing advocate. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that and your reasoning behind being a champion for that. Obviously, as our viewers know, I was a Plymouth Housing celebrity dancer for Seattle Dances, trying to get Nate on the roster. So it's important to me, but I'd love to hear why you care.
Yeah, no, thanks. Great question. And, where's it come from? Most recently, we're about to step off my 4-year tenure as a member of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, which is, is its own special government too, created 5 years ago to be able to help address homelessness across King County. But how I even got asked or be on the board was my history in working with nonprofits like Northwest Harvest, North Helpline, and Food Lifeline, and many others. But kind of going back to what I said earlier about having a bit of a rough childhood, is it wasn't just my own stability; it's also that of my biological father. I've been privileged to be able to be raised for most of my life now with my mom, my stepfather Greg, my mom Linda, and stepfather Greg. But my biological father has been experiencing homelessness since 2001, back in Hawaii. And there are times in which I've been able to see him or not, or I hear glimpses of what's going on with him or not. And that's a big journey. I remember in 2001, I was just a freshman at high school at UW, and he was heading back there to try and take care of his own life, be a thoughtful, take care of his own life and himself at that point. He had spent some years living in South King County just to be close to me, but it wasn't working out. But becomes a larger conversation or story because in 2015, when I was still working in the U.S. Senate, I was traveling across the country, and I was in San Francisco, actually, for a major fundraiser at a billionaire's house, who I won't name. But I remember getting a call from my aunt in Hawaii and saying, "Hey, Nate, just want to let you know your grandma's not doing well. You probably want to come out here if you have a chance to come out here when you can." And I didn't know how to present that to my boss at the time. I was in a pretty aggressive work schedule. And so I didn't say anything. That night, the next day, I still flew from San Francisco to Seattle to do a round of work and travel across our state. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to Hawaii. And so I flew out the next day, and it was Mother's Day morning. I text when I land, and it's like, hey, where do I need to be? What hospital are you at? And my aunt's like, just come to our house. Okay, I didn't know why, but figured I'd do that. And I went down to the airport to get my bag at the baggage claim, and I see this guy. He looks familiar, and he's just sitting at a seat with 2 large garbage bags, one on his left and one on his right. And he's got a hat on, and he's eating something. And he looked really familiar, and it made me very nervous. Ended up grabbing my bag and walked over to him. I just had to have the courage to say something. I said, excuse me, sir, like, what's your name? And he said, Robert. I go, Robert, what's your last name? And he says, Caminos. And he's like, he got excited that somebody was engaging him in conversation. And he's like, what's your name? And I showed him my Alaska Airlines bag tag, Nathaniel Caminos. And he looks at me and he says, oh my God, like, who are you? Like, are you playing my son? And I'm like, no, I am your son. And I haven't seen him in 14 years. And how do you try and catch up with your biological dad after that long, not knowing what's been going on? And so I felt like I was just regurgitating my CV, my resume of when I last saw him when I was in college. And then I came time to ask him, so how are you? What have you been up to? He got immediately defensive, and he's like, what do you want me to say? I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing this. And I kept asking me, why am I here? Why are you here? And I tried to explain to him delicately, I'm here because your mom's not doing well. But he just wasn't conceptualizing it. I remember walking away because he started to get defensive, and I remember looking back at him, and I said, and I decided to write on the back of my business card my personal contact info. And I gave it to him. I said, hey, if there's anything you need, let me know. I love you, Dad. And I probably even just had those 3 words to anybody in a long time. He says, love you too, NATO. And he kind of gives me like a signature head kick. I was walking out of the airport crying, call my aunt, say, hey, you'll never guess who I just ran into. And my aunt said, sorry that happened, but also I apologize, like, just got to let you know, like, Grandma passed away this morning while you were flying over here. And it was Mother's Day morning. And my grandma was always sad of not knowing where her son was for all those years. And like, what a crazy moment on Mother's Day morning that I find my dad mere hours after she passed, that we were reunited in that way. And, so I have a lot of my own experiences in working in social justice nonprofits. There's a lot that I can get to about what is this tattoo and why do I do what I do as a public servant. But in regards to housing instability or stability that we try to achieve, really kind of goes to the heart of where I came, my own trials and tribulations. So it's very personal to me, rather than kind of addressing my own strategy, my own relationships, my own thought processes as a professional. But it's also how can I do and help contribute to causes in like housing and homelessness in this way.
Well, I think that do you feel like there's definitely a stigma to men who are going through homelessness versus, because I'm on the board of Porchlight, and then they focus on helping support for men who's going through homelessness. What I see is, I think for women and children, in comparison, I think we tend to have more resources. We gain more sympathy toward us as a man. So I guess if there's a fellow friend who's going through a hard time, how would you advise to give them support without feeling like they're losing their dignity, and also having that safe space? Because I think it's really it's hard for women to build. I think it's even harder for adult men to have that space to showing that any sense of vulnerability, right? Like how would you?
I think they're all really hard, right? And I also just applaud City of Bellevue, a lot of our business and community leaders who even made the men's shelter in Bellevue possible in that regard. I think every individual is uniquely different given their story of where they ended up leading, where they're, that it's something they just happen to fall into now, or they've been through for several years. to follow up on that interaction with my dad, I ended up coming back a month later with my uncle to try and find him, and we found him again at the airport, but he didn't want to be found. He didn't want to be engaged, and in the end, it was a bit of a choice. Like, he just didn't want to be in a shelter system too, and so it really makes, like, not to be like an advertisement for Plymouth Housing, but permanent supportive housing was obviously the end goal in being able to provide that type of stability and space, because there are instances in which people, especially if you're an individual person, whether a man or woman, where your belongings are all of your belongings. They're very personal to you. I mean, I ended up finding my dad's tent several months later near the airport, and he still had that business card and a little box of things that clearly were other things of, they were really important to him. I won't say what they were, but it clearly was. Yeah. And so, to be able to be in a shelter with strangers for the most part, to risk like losing your belongings. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons too about why that might be the case. But
well, thank you for sharing that with us. By the way, I'm
Thank you
still
so much.
over here processing my emotions, but I want to pivot a little bit and bring us back to a lighter topic, friendship. And I'm curious from your perspective as a male, because we haven't really talked about it from a male's perspective, but this idea of empowering friendships, especially as adults, like adult friendships are hard in general. And I think what we always find so rare about our friendship is that it's actually still pretty new. Claire and I are 2.5 years in, but it's like, when you know.
Right.
So what role has friendships played in your life as an adult? And are there kind of newfound friendships that have really changed you?
Oh yeah, it's a great question. A big part of I remember there was about 4 years from 2009 to 2013 where like I purposely didn't even date. I just made my career my focus, and I was also leading a nonprofit at the time. I was coaching youth basketball. I was trying to do everything. I also felt at a time that it was like my purpose in life wasn't necessarily for me to be happy, it was to make other people happy, as sad as that sounds, right? I really kind of had that mantra going a while. And I mentioned to you both in different capacities that I had a freak accident in blowing out and really injuring my knee quite badly in 2012. Funny enough, on April Fool's Day, so when I call my mom from the emergency room, knowing that I'm already a jokester, calling her from the emergency room, she thinks it's a joke for about a minute, and then she realizes, oh, he's not joking. I got to go to Harborview. I mean, they pumped me full of drugs by that point, too. So
you were really entertaining.
That's their fault. That was their fault at the ER there. But it was a really tragic injury, and it took months of rehab to then lead to a surgery, to then do rehab and learn how to walk again. And it was an experience of being able to, I felt sheltered. I didn't even ask my hairstylist to come down and cut my hair. I was like trying to like just staying at my parents' house. But I had, leading up to that point, my mom, my stepdad, my sister, they lived 45 minutes away, but they might have well as just been strangers. But having that time, other than them like take me to the hospital for all these rehab engagements, allowed me to really bond or like reconnect as a family. But at the same time too, I had a slew of friends, and I said, no, don't come down and see me. I just don't want to see people see me broken, right? Yeah. The way that we're all, I'm all dressed up nice today and whatnot. I didn't want them to see me like that, being in a wheelchair. But I had friends who were like, no, I'm coming. Get ready. I'll be there tomorrow or whatever. And they carried me into their car and drove me out, took me out to lunch. And those are the folks that I still remember to this day. Are like, wow, those are obviously true friends who are going to pick me up when I'm broken, break through my barrier, my shell that I created for myself, to try and stand tall and allow myself to be vulnerable and it to be okay.
Those are the best friends.
Yeah.
Those are the friends who allow us to be vulnerable, and then
who stalk you at the hospital.
Yes, you do. That's why I love you. I still have the mug. Tell me to slow down. She's the best.
Well, you've now been indoctrinated into this trio.
You are part of this trio.
Yeah.
Yes.
And But with that, there's kind of a stigma about men and women being friends, right? And is that possible? And can men and women truly be friends, particularly as an adult? What's your take on platonic friendships?
You know, it's not like heterosexual gender norm that's been there, right? Of like, dudes got to only be with dudes, and like we're all having our quote unquote locker room talk. Like, those
By
things
the
are
way,
all fun.
Locker room talk is a real thing. My son is on a hockey team now, and
But
the
he started already?
shenanigans in the locker room are unbelievable at 11 years old.
Yeah.
So it's a thing.
Oh, I hear. What doesn't mean that women don't have their own locker room? I don't know what that is, but
It's called wine cooler talk.
wine cooler talk.
Do we talk in locker rooms? I don't know. No, I think so.
Sorry, go ahead. I digress.
You know, some of my best friends growing up have been women, especially as you're talking about friendships in adult world too. I mean, my wife and I didn't even have a traditional wedding, but if we had a bride and groom side, you know, I definitely would have had at least one key female there, if not my best woman, be there by my side during that moment. And it's interesting because you know, it's anybody could really be like my guy, gal, binary pal in any of these respects, right? Because you're kind of just closing yourself off from the ability to just be able to connect with people. Right? You mentioned on this podcast, you mentioned earlier, a lot of the folks that are listening and tuning in that you're hearing feedback are from men. Yeah. And from the guy that listened to or watched all 14 of your episodes,
you're the best.
Yeah, I'm resonating with your stories as mothers, but as a father, because we're parents.
Yeah.
I'm listening and resonating with your stories about, you know, highly achieving professionals in our respective industries, because I've been striving to try and do the same thing for the past 20 plus years. There's something that we're resonating as people that go beyond what your gender may or may not be. And on the fun side of it all, I would say, I remember one of my best friends growing up, Catherine, 10 some odd years ago. Like, we were both single, we were both professionals, we were both dating a number of people, and you kind of have like validation like that guy was crazy. Okay, yeah, that was right. Or like advice and guidance on those types of things too. But it was just there's something there. You're holding yourself back if you're having that be a thing. And even take it a step further, even my exes, I make sure I haven't been friends with most of them except for maybe one.
Well, we won't ask about that.
Where, we make sure like hey, at some point in my life, like we really cared about one another, if not loved each other. And I will always respect and appreciate that, and want to make sure that if we're running into there's always that respect there. And
my mom does that really well. So my mom's actually on her fourth marriage, and it's been the longest, and they are wonderfully happily together. And she has remained friends, other than my biological father, who isn't open to that friendship as much. But the other two are since remarried, and the six of them all have dinner together.
Oh, wow.
And it's like the coolest thing. At first I thought it was really weird, and I'm like, this is weird. Because my ex-husband wouldn't be caught dead having dinner with me. Like, and I always thought the same thing. Like, you loved me at one point, and now that we're not married, like, I am your worst enemy. Like, how does this happen, right? Yeah. But as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate that about my mom, and that she's been able to hold these friendships. And now my children get to benefit from that, because when we have family gatherings, so my sons love to have grandparent birthday celebrations, because there's literally like 16 of them. And so they get all kinds of gifts, right? They're not dumb. Like, they know if they invite everybody. But it started with Parker at a young age. He wanted his annual grandparent dinner, and all of my parents would come, who live in Washington. And now, my husband, Andrew, his parents are also divorced, and both of those sets come. So we just had dinner in September to celebrate Andrew and Colton's birthdays, and everybody came, and we were like a table of 20. Oh, wow. And my kids love that. So cool. And it's like, it speaks to that, like, just because you aren't in love with each other, like, you can still hold space for that person, and the friendship and the value that they bring and the perspective that they bring that's different. Like, none of my father figures, and by the way, in my first marriage, there were my mom was on her third marriage, and all three of them walked me down the aisle. Because they're so different, and they play such a different role in my life. And they were all at my second wedding. Parker walked me down the aisle in that one. But it's just, I love that notion that like, just because I want to hang out with you doesn't mean I want anything more than that, right? Like it's we can celebrate each other's beauty by being purely platonic.
Absolutely.
Well, I think like any kind of relationship, doesn't matter what it advances to, the foundation has to be always friendship. I think there should be like a really respect for each other, of like base foundation. Even if you become husband and wife in the future, usually you start with this interest in each other's personality and I truly respect for each other, and then grow into something deeper and more passionate, right? So I think like I agree. I feel like just because we're not together doesn't mean we have to be enemies. And I think also there's one moment I'm like, we are so fond of that person. So it shows that we have a great taste. So, right, Brent?
Well, you know, when I did try and reach out to, like, we're all the exes, I want to make sure we're all good. I did that, and a couple of them were like, get back together. No, that's not.
You think too much, okay?
Yeah, there's some maybe that we don't want to bring back.
I'm just a good person, that's it.
Yeah.
What is, I guess, like, it's almost end of the year. It's October. It's middle of October already.
Yeah,
Literally
I can't
today's
believe
the
it.
middle of
Yeah.
October.
I know.
Before end
And
of
we're
the
all
year.
turning a year older
we
here
are
within the
turning.
next 2 months. All three of
Yes.
us.
But
yeah.
you're turning 42 first, right?
42 in a couple weeks.
And then you're turning 41 and 42.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So what is your big dream? Do you have a big dream for like the coming year?
We need to know what we're cheerleading for.
Yeah, we need to know.
We're good
Well-
cheerleaders.
We're great cheerleaders.
I appreciate that because, you know, like even in my professional life, I always end every single meeting, just like the one I had earlier today. I was like, is there anything we can do, anything I can do to be helpful to you outside of whatever we discussed, right? And so I get thrown off actually when anybody asks me that. I mean, Patrick mentioned it even at the BDA trip on Thursday night. Like, whenever you talk to Nate, you always ask you anything. Like, okay, well, I'm glad that you interact. It's just part of my routine. But so I rarely get asked. So I appreciate you too asking me that. You know, I don't know if I'm going to be doing epic shit.
But you
this
should.
year in that
But you
regard, or say I don't know what my theme or my mantra is for the, you know, turning the new leaf, new year. But a big part of what I would say in thinking about that question is and probably your most popular episode as I hear until this one obviously gets published.
Obvi.
The art of self-care,
Yeah.
right? And we're all caregivers. We're all, the three of us in major ways. But I can't, just like as was discussed before, I can't help other people if I can't take care of myself. My wife tells me all the time, you got to live forever. You got to live forever, dude. And like even when I'm driving, sometimes I'm like, no, not gonna do that. I'm a dad now. And
Dad
so,
driving.
You know, I don't know if you two know this, but even before Janessa and I had our two boys, we were foster parents for
I
a
didn't
few
know
years
that.
for a long-term placement kids, and so that was a little bit of a boot camp situation of what it was to then welcome children of our own, and I learned a lot through that experience of helping those kids out. But I'm still been like on year 7 or 8 now of changing diapers at some point over in the night or bottle feeding. And I, welcoming our first biological kid in early 2020, and ever since I've just put myself on the back burner and made sure that my wife and my kids, my 2 boys, are my priority, and that I will sacrifice my mental health, my time, my social time, inevitably my physical health, to make sure that they're doing their best in the early part of their lives. And my wife, obviously, coming out of all the physical, all the challenges of what it means to bring 2 kids into this world in just a few years. But I think it's like a little bit of me time now, a little Oprah me time that I got to give myself in terms of defining what next year looks like. And so, saying yes to stuff, being invited to things, making times to do more things social, dancing, all the other things that make that you the earlier question, like what brings you joy, right?
Yeah.
So like let go.
Karaoke. Will there be more karaoke?
Karaoke. Feeling like, and I can do these things without feeling selfish or guilt anymore. That it's time to be able to like come out of my cave again. So
There's a major thing with the guilt, and once you let it go and you realize you can't pour from an empty cup, then it's time to fill the cup back up. So well, we're doing something really fun to end our episodes with you, and these are rapid fire questions that you didn't get sent to you.
Okay, I'm ready.
This is the most important question right here.
It is. Okay.
Sit up for this.
Okay. Window or aisle seat?
Oh, window. Yeah, you got to fall asleep for like the first
Okay.
And you just don't drink water.
This is really important. Coffee or tea?
Ooh, you know, I was a matcha guy. I'm a big matcha guy, but I don't know. I had Belden Cafe's mocha last week, and it got me. So I'd say coffee. But
Okay. Don't worry. Both ways. I like both. It's okay.
Okay. If you could swap jobs with anyone at the airport, what job would it be?
Easy. Karen Zog-Black on my team is our international affairs senior manager, and she does an amazing job. Her job is essentially to travel the world and also be the first that you see in hosting all of our international delegates through our airport and seaport. And so she's got the coolest gig.
That's a cool job.
Yeah.
Okay. I might need to go back to school and more to get that job.
Yeah.
One day. One day. Would you rather fly first class once or get free lounge access for a whole year?
Oh, first class, yeah. Working in an airport, I got an office, yeah. No, first class for sure.
Okay, so in a way of indoctrinating you, I have a little something for you.
Okay.
All right, this is your own old fashioned in a bottle.
Nice.
So welcome to the Old Fashions Club.
Thank you so much.
If you're going to be friends with us, you must drink old fashions. That's what we do.
It's my signature drink, so surprising to hear. Started with you, and then you indoctrinated her.
Yeah. So
you're
we're
really
together
special.
now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
We're a
yes,
trio.
yes, we're-
Yeah.
I mean, Saturday, we guess
Love
we can
it.
So
have that
Saturday,
back.
we'll
Yes?
Oh yes,
we'll be having some
absolutely.
old fashions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh.
Thank
We are
you.
so glad you joined us today, and truly
yeah.
can't thank you enough for being a supporter and a friend and an advocate. And we are just so blessed to have you in our circle.
So
We're
happy
so
to be here, and pleasure to learn so much from each of you throughout this journey. And obviously, I'm here to do whatever I can to be helpful to you too. And your podcast is flourishing. I was mentioning Linda earlier. Looking forward to Times Square paying you to feature them on
That's
their
right.
billboards.
Yeah,
Gotta come
three
back
of us.
sooner than later. So yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Next time.